Minister without portfolio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I believe we have unanimous consent that up to 5 minutes be allocated to each party to speak in remembrance of the late Ivan Thrasher.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. I'd like to welcome to the Speaker's gallery today here for the tribute to Ivan Wilfred Thrasher, member for Windsor Sandwich in the 27th Parliament. Orpha Thrasher, his wife, his son Jeff Thrasher, Ruth Perrant, daughter, Shelley Thrasher, daughter, Rose Barlow, daughter, and her husband Mike Barlow, grandson Matthew Perrant, granddaughter Rachel Uten-Bogart, Ben Kelly, grandson, Riley Thrasher, granddaughter, Patricia Wright Bodig, Rachel Bodig, and Theo Bodig, seated in the Speaker's gallery. On behalf of the Legislature, welcome to Queen's Park today. Member from Newmarket-Aurora.
Thank you, Speaker. It is a real honour for me to stand in my place and represent the Progressive Conservative Caucus as we pay tribute to a former colleague. I want to, as well, extend a very special invitation to the family. Orpha Thrasher knows this place. She heard about it as well through her husband, who I'm sure on many occasions would come home and express his frustration with how things are done here or not done here. Speaker was Frank Sinatra, who was fond of saying, "May you live to be 100." Our former colleague in this House, Ivan William Thrasher, almost reached that goal in his own richly fulfilled life. In fact, I understand that he is prominently featured on the website entitled live100.com. And I believe that he would have us all visit that website regularly. Born to William and Ruby Thrasher on May 21, 1914 at Amherstburg, Ontario, Ivan was a graduate of the Universities of Toronto and Windsor. Ivan joined the Canadian Armed Forces in 1940 and served in the 1st and 2nd Regiment until June of 1945. He was in the Army survey crew and was assigned to battlefields in Africa and Italy before he arrived in the Netherlands. He returned to Holland for the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Holland, where he befriended his host Carol and Ada Sipkes of Apeldoorn. Ivan married his wife Orpha on March 8, 1946, and that's when his life really began. So Orpha tells me. They became the proud parents of 5 children: Shelley, Jeff, Ruby, Ruth, and Rosemary. Speaker, having settled in Ruthven, Ontario, Ivan began his working life as a turkey farmer. For those who don't know, Ruthven is situated halfway between Leamington and Kingsville. And those of you who may know this and don't care, it is the little village where I first lived after I immigrated to this country in 1956. It's a wonderful little village, and it is a place that I remember very fondly. I also remember very fondly the first time I met Ivan Thrasher. Speaker, I was the sacrificial lamb for the Progressive Conservative Party in 1975. And at that point, I was convinced that I could win in the riding of Essex South. And so I sought out, of course, the elder statesman, the only Progressive Conservative who won for decades, but that's going to change, who had won, and he, of course, was Ivan Thrasher. And so I paid the visit as a young man, and I asked him his advice. And he said, "Frank, don't do it." I knew that I knew that this was a man of wisdom, but of course, being young and inexperienced, I didn't listen. And so I did run. I did not win, as he predicted. I ran again in 77 and didn't win again. And so, anyway, that's another story. We're here to talk about Ivan. Ivan's next career was in real estate, and through his efforts, Thrasher Real Estate became very well known throughout the Windsor area and Essex County area. In 1964, Ivan was elected to the provincial legislature as the Progressive Conservative MPP for Windsor Sandwich. During that by-election campaign, Ivan, the consummate entrepreneur and promoter and marketeer, arranged for a tugboat to tow a gigantic election sign back and forth along the Detroit River waterfront. After his electoral victory as a PC member in what, as I mentioned, is a largely, or was, a largely liberal territory, then Premier John Robarts made a point of attending Ivan's swearing-in ceremony. It was that special, Speaker. As an MPP, Ivan was an ardent champion for the construction of the EC Row Expressway. As Ivan said, looking back, I think I could have had it finished in a couple of years. The reality is that the expressway became a political football in ensuing years, subject to so many delays over the next 3 decades that it went into the Guinness Book of Records as the world's slowest highway project. The next one will be the 407. His personal dream when he entered politics was to obtain federal and provincial cooperation on a plan to build multi-sport athletic facilities for youth and communities across the country. He dreamed of doing this because of his commitment to young people and also because he was a strong supporter of the Olympic Games. And he believed that Canada should develop more world-class athletes. But as Ivan admitted in frustration, I quote, "I never got to first base with that. Getting federal and provincial governments to agree on the project was impossible." End of quote. Well, Ivan, not much has changed. But we're grateful for his optimism and the fact that he did what he believed that he was called to do. Ivan always said he enjoyed making a difference in the lives of the constituents he represented at Queen's Park. He helped them navigate the red tape of government on practical issues such as pension and workers' compensation claims. As Ivan himself said, it was unbelievable how many people I was able to do something for. And that, of course, was his motivation, to help people, and Speaker, that is his legacy. Ivan was also very enthusiastic about working with the then Windsor Mayor, Michael Patrick, on local civic projects such as a new charter for the Windsor Raceway. Ivan left provincial politics in 1967 with his observation, Speaker, I quote, "People are getting extremely disappointed with politicians." End of quote. Well, back to the future. That, of course, is a quote that unfortunately lives on today. But as Ivan did, and we all here will continue to do the best we can to serve the people who elected us. His advice to any party was to get budget deficits down and regain control over the economy. I say that here today on behalf of Ivan Thrasher and on behalf of the Progressive Conservative Party to the government in power. Get those deficits down and get control over the economy. Now, with the sincerest apologies to my colleagues opposite, Speaker, and please don't call me to order on this, I have to share this with colleagues. Ivan Thrasher also said this: "I still have not figured out what the Liberals stand for." And that's a quote, Speaker, and I want to thank Ivan Thrasher for that quote, because it now it is in Hansard and for all to hear forever. And I have to say to Ivan Thrasher, I join him in that sentiment. I can't figure it out either. Speaker, Ivan Thrasher followed his passion for breeding and racing thoroughbred horses, at one time having more than 40 horses. I wish I would have known him better. I would have got some inside tips, and maybe we could have done well. But it was a passion of his, and he followed it. He was a lifelong self-learner. Ivan became an accomplished pianist. In his 80s, he taught himself how to repair violins. And I'm told he was second to none in the game of Scrabble. Only Orpha could tell us the truth about that. Ivan and Orpha moved to Guelph in 1983, but they refused to call themselves retired. Ivan continued with his daily workouts of regular calisthenics, long walks, and hanging upside down from a bar for a quarter of an hour daily to stretch his muscles. I'm sure this must have been very entertaining for Orpha, especially on some occasions. He also played the piano for an hour each day as a reminder of the years in Windsor, when he and his brothers played in an 8-piece band. Ivan was also an avid golfer, and a member of the Beech Grove Golf Club, the Windsor Yacht Club, the Windsor Club, the Ad and Sales Club, the Essex Scottish, Moose Club, and Press Club. Reflecting on his varied past, Ivan said this: "I have no regrets." And Speaker, I'm sure that his family to this day is very proud as they consider all that Ivan Thrasher has accomplished. Ivan William Thrasher left this world a better place on January 21st, and he was in his 97th year. He left with wonderful memories of his 64 years together with his wife Orpha and his 5 children. Ivan also leaves behind his grandchildren Bram, Rachel, Matt, Zach, Annie, Ben, Claire, and Riley, and his great-granddaughter Malia. Ivan was their hero, and they were blessed to have had him in their lives. So were all of us, Speaker, and all the members of this chamber who will always count him as a valued colleague and as an exemplary public service. God bless him. We relish the thoughts, and we thank his family for sharing him with us in this legislature. Thank you.
The member from Timmins-James-Baie.
Well, first of all, I want to say a hard act to follow because you've taken basically all my material, so I will do the best that I can. First of all, on behalf of Andrew Horvath and your Democrats, we want to welcome the family here today. We understand as being a party in third position, sometimes being a minority as he was in Windsor is not an easy thing to do, and he did it with pride and he did it with gumption. So we say to the family our congratulations to you and our thanks for having lent your husband, your father, your grandfather, your friend to this legislature for the time that he was here. He was first elected, as I was reading, back in 1964 in Windsor Sandwich, where Ivan Thrasher became probably one of the very few people to be elected out of the Windsor politics as a Conservative. We know that Windsor at the time, as it is now, is either normally New Democrat or it's Liberal, and whatever the swing was at the time, he sort of went the opposite way. And it was such a momentous occasion for him to be elected to the legislature that Premier Robarts actually went to his swearing in and was with him the day that he was sworn in at the here as we are by the clerks after the election. And I think it signifies to what degree. I hope it's nothing I said, Speaker. Sorry, I digress. So I just, as I was saying, the Premier decided that he wanted to be there in order to send a signal to the people of Windsor how important it was for his government to have elected a Conservative. And I think there was a lot of hope and a lot of desire and a lot of plans were made from that by-election victory that there were great things to come in Windsor back in the late 1960s when it came to the Conservatives. He served in the Parliament from the time of his by-election up until the next election, which I believe was in 1967, where he was called upon by his party to do a lot of work because he was the only Conservative member from the Windsor area. The whip of the day and the party leader of the day, Mr. Robarts and others, decided what a novel idea. We should get him running around the province and doing all of these wonderful things for the Conservative Party and give him a role in government so that he can be out there in other ridings, you know, just saying how possible it is to win in those ridings that we don't hold now. And so we spent the better part of 3 years doing a lot of work for the party. I know in researching this through the legislative research, he was called upon by the Premier to work on a number of issues, but he was also called upon the party to do a fair amount of work when it comes to doing the work in those ridings where there needed to be some work done to get Conservatives elected. So along comes the election of 1967, and he, unfortunately for him and fortunately for somebody else, doesn't get re-elected. And he muses in the paper, as I was reading from the Windsor papers, that there was, in his view, 2 reasons that he wasn't elected. The first one was that the party had him going everywhere except spending time in his riding as a brand new member, doing the things that you need to do to be better known by your voters so that you can build that connection so they vote you back in when it comes to re-election. And he says the second thing was there was a downpour. On the day of the election, there was a great big rainstorm to the point that people actually decided they didn't have to go vote. So he was doing what we all do on election day. He was polling the vote. And he was on the phones and on the doors saying, hey, Conservative supporters, get out there. And they say, but it's raining outside. But you'll be okay without my vote. Don't worry about it. And he was defeated. So he says those were, in his view, the 2 reasons that he didn't get re-elected. But he learned a very hard lesson. And it's a lesson that unfortunately some of us have learned even harder. I think of a particular member who's, I don't know why I can't remember the name, who was defeated in 1995, Mr. Dagler, I think the name was. And that's not what happened, obviously, in this case, but once you leave politics, sometimes it's not an easy thing to do. He had a very successful real estate business. And because he had been a Conservative in Windsor, from what I understand and from what research has given me, and tell me if this is not the case, he found it a little bit difficult at times to hold some of the clients that he had on the basis of his political affiliation. And he found out that his time here, although very rewarding and very meaningful as far as what he contributed to the province, there was a certain price that he had to pay when he went back into private life. Eventually people got over that, and the people of Windsor are who they are. They're open-hearted, and they understood at the end of the day that was just what he did, and everybody has a right to participate in democracy. But nonetheless, he found that there was an effect. The other thing is that he got elected in a time, and this is a conversation I've had with a number of former members who were in at that particular time of the 1960s. The salary of the day was somewhere around $8,000 a year. And you gave up a full-time job somewhere else where you got home every night and you enjoyed the things that everybody else enjoys when it comes to family, friends, and community. And he was here on $8,000 a year, having to pay his Toronto accommodation from Windsor when he stayed here out of that $8,000, having to pay for his office in Windsor Sandwich out of his $8,000, and having to run the entire constituency office out of his salary. And so I think it says something of the breed of politician that served at that time. And I look at Mr. I'm having blanks. Mr. Jakubuski's father, who served here at that time. It took a pretty big amount of courage and a fair amount of determination and will and the want to serve for people to do it at the rates that we were paying back then, because it was a very tough business. You didn't get airplane rides back to your riding. You had to take the train, or you had to ride, or you had to drive, which means to say you had even less time when it come to being able to be with your family and your constituents. So he understood that there was a cost to being elected, and that cost was to his family life, but they survived and they were with him all the way through, and still today in his memory. But there was also a cost when it came to his ability to be able to move forward with what was going on in his life financially. He, as was mentioned by Mr. Klees, was an avid fan of horses. And I just want to say to Mr. Klees, I haven't found a horse owner yet who can give you good advice on a bet. So you'd have probably been better off not getting the advice. You might have lost your shirt. Not that he wasn't good with horses, but such is the nature of the horse business, but was very much one who enjoyed horses, as well as Mr. Klees said, was an avid sports fan and had a vision that partly happened because I would say that this did happen to an extent, what you spoke of earlier, which is joint federal-provincial projects in order to build sort of a sportsplex, a place that youth can go and to do useful things other than having idle hands and getting in trouble in our communities. And I remember in 1967, as a young man, there was for 1 year the Expo program that we built across this nation and across our province, plenty and plenty of facilities, sporting facilities in our communities. And our community, just up the street from where I live, is the Centennial Arena that was built as a result of federal provincial money. So I'm not so sure that he didn't get some effect, because certainly that did happen for a short time. Unfortunately, cooperation on the capital side with federal and provincial governments is not something that's maintained and been in place each and every year, but certainly in 1966 and 1967, at the time that he was in the legislature, that actually did happen. And I don't know for sure, but I would imagine it had something to do with the work that he had to do. I also want to say this, which was interesting, and I'm going to take the quote a little bit to another length, and that is the point that Mr. Klees said. And this was a quote out of the Windsor Star, and it says, this is Mr. Ivan Thrasher, it says, at the Times, I think that NDP leader Bob Rae has done a pretty good job. At times, I think he's done a horrible job. Like a lot of voters, he says he hasn't figured out who the Liberal leader Lynn MacLeod stands for. So I want to clarify, he was talking about Lynn MacLeod, but probably talking about the Liberals. But interestingly, he's a man of his word and he's a man of his conviction, says PC leader Mike Harris may need a bit more seasoning, he figures, but when it comes right down to it, I'll vote for him. So clearly he was a Conservative through and through and understood that at the end of the day that he was going to back his party. So I just want to say to the family that's here and those who may be watching, Mr. Thrasher served here a short time, but certainly had an effect on this legislature. There were plenty of people back home and within his family that are proud of the time that he had here, and we say on behalf of all of us here that are here today, we stand on the shoulders of people like Ivan Thrasher, and we thank you for having lent him to us for the last 3 years.
Member for Guelph.
Yes, thank you, Speaker, and I'm very pleased and honoured to be able, on behalf of the Liberal caucus, to join in the tribute to Ivan Thrasher. And Thrasher family, meet the current member from Essex. The reason that I'm here speaking rather than the current member is because the current member is the Deputy Speaker, and as you see, he's just taken the chair. So this explains why me. I would like to offer my sincere condolences to Orpha, his beloved wife of 64 years, his children Ruby, Ruth, Rose, Jeff, and Shelley, 4 out of 5 who are here today, his 8 grandchildren, some of whom are here today, and his the newest addition to the Thrasher clan, his great-granddaughter Malia, who isn't here today because she's just a little wee tiny bit of a thing. I must say, though, that having read about Ivan and talked to the family, I think our tribute should really be a celebration of a life well lived. Ivan was born May 21st, 1914, near Amherstburg, Ontario. As you've heard, he joined the Canadian Armed Forces in 1940 and served until June 1945. He participated in the Italian campaign and helped to liberate the Netherlands. Ivan returned to Holland with his wife Orpha to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Holland, and again returned for the 60th reunion. And again, as Mr. Klees has explained, following the war, Ivan and Orpha settled in Ruthven, and for those of you who didn't figure out Kingsville, as far as I can figure out, that's near Lake Erie. They'll all know where Lake Erie is. And they built a home and got into turkey farming, Miss Van Bommel. She does chickens. Soon he was starting on his next career as a real estate broker, and Thrasher Real Estate became a well-known business in Windsor. The family moved closer to Windsor than to Old Castle. And his daughter Rosemary remembers that family was very important to Mom and Dad back then. And we did a lot as a family, from going to church every Sunday, regular visits to Grandma and Grandpa Thrasher's, picking strawberries and cherries, and wonderful road trips to Jekyll Island. The cottage in Kearney has brought us, our immediate family, even closer. And a recurring theme from all of his children were those Scrabble games, which reportedly Ivan usually won, but I did note that various children took great delight in reporting that sometimes that they actually managed to win. But if anybody was keeping score, it was clear that Ivan, with his outstanding vocabulary, was the usual winner. In 1964, Ivan won a seat in the provincial legislature, and I do have to remind Mr. Klees that he's the last Tory MPP for the Windsor-Essex area provincially, and he still holds that record of being the most recent Tory MPP from the Windsor-Essex area. He served in the legislature from 64 to 67 and sat on 6 different committees while he was here. Ivan was particularly proud of his contributions, as been mentioned, to the Windsor Raceway, to St. Clair College, and that was the era when, in the mid-60s, when the community colleges were just being built, and getting a community college for the Windsor area was very important. And also, as has been noted, his contribution to the EC Row Expressway. His daughter Ruby recalls Ivan making the move to Toronto after becoming the MPP, and she says that while he was an MPP in Toronto, she was at university, and remembers going shopping with him to get all the necessities for his apartment and going out for nice dinners. So it seems to me that, as is still the case today, university-age children still find ways to get their parents to pay for things. Any of us who have had university-age children know this. His son Jeff also joined Ivan here for a time as a page here at Queen's Park, and his granddaughter Rachel, who lives in Guelph, also served as a page here a generation later. After relinquishing his seat in the next election, he soon found his passion in breeding and racing thoroughbred horses, at one time having 40 horses. And how did that happen? Well, Orpha tells me that in 1967, Ivan, as the real estate man, sold a small horse farm on the outskirts of Windsor, and in lieu of commission, he was rewarded with 3 thoroughbred horses, and the love affair with horse racing was on. Ivan Orphan moved from Windsor and bought a large horse farm north of Acton. So again, for the geography, this would put them living in Ted Arnott's current riding. Then they moved to Guelph, my riding, missed the country, moved back to Puslinch, Ted Arnott's riding, and then found that it was more convenient to be in Guelph, so finally landed in Guelph, which was a very good decision. Ivan was a lifelong learner and Renaissance man. He was an accomplished pianist, took violin lessons in his 80s, and taught himself how to repair violins. Ivan's devotion to healthy eating and physical fitness was legendary. I'm not sure all of us would want to emulate the hanging upside down part of it. But his son Jeff says that he remembers when he was an MPP, he was trying to get the government to adopt a program that would allow all Canadians the right to free exercise via the YMCA or some other form of national free workout facility. Unhappily, in those days, they did not consider the long-term effects of a healthy population on the nation's health care costs. So maybe Ivan would approve of the fact that his current MPP, me, was actually involved in setting nutrition guidelines for food that's served to kids in school, and involved in making sure that elementary kids have daily physical exercise in elementary schools. I think that's some initiative that even if we are Liberals, he would have approved of. Over the last 25 years, and I've explained where they lived already, I didn't think I had ever met Ivan, but Orpha tells me that I'm wrong. Apparently one day during the 2003 campaign, I was outdoor knocking and I knocked on a door, and it turns out I actually had a conversation with Ivan, and I'm sorry, I don't remember. I actually had sore knuckles at the end of that experience. I had to stop knocking on doors with my left hand because my right hand had worn out. But I think what Ivan and Orpha and I all share is a great commitment in the belief that it's really important to get out there and knock on doors and talk to your constituents. And I'm very pleased to say that apparently Ivan reported to Orpha when she got home that this person called Liz Sandals had called at the door, and that he did approve, if not of my party, he at least approved of my door knocking and canvassing technique. So I did meet him after all, although briefly. Ivan spoke about his values on his website, which was quoted previously. He said, "One of the most important things instilled in me by my mother was love. Never go to bed hating someone. The other main thing is honesty. Never, ever tell lies. If you shake a man's hand on a deal, make good or die on it if necessary." I wish I had known Ivan longer than the few minutes at the door. Ivan was a good man who packed a lot of living into his 97 years and did it all with love and laughter and optimism. Thank you to Ivan for sharing with him and for Ivan's service to Ontario. Thank you.
Well, thank you to the members from Newmarket-Aurora, Timmins-James, Baie, and Guelph. And I would like to add myself that, yes, had you still resided in the hamlet of Ruthven, you would be in the riding of Essex, and you would be very close to the lake, and you would still be in the Sun Parlour of Canada. I will, the Speaker's office and the clerks will see that you receive a DVD of today's proceedings and a copy of Hansard. And I want to say on behalf of all that we are so pleased that you could be here today while we had this tribute for Ivan Thrasher. Thank you.